Before we begin, this video is based on our own experience with Resident Evil Requiem, and reflects our personal views on what it offers and how it feels to play. As always, we recommend that you make your own informed call by looking into the game yourself and ensuring that it matches your expectations, your standards, and your personal values. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. Resident Evil Requiem is poised to be one of the biggest games of the year. Not through loudness, ambition, or colossal marketing budget, but because the developer has honed their self-awareness through a string of well-received remakes. You see, the studio has spent the last few years studying its own history, charting what works and chucking out what doesn't. And the lessons learned is that restraint, after all, raises the hackles more than spectacle. Now you might be thinking, hey, Requiem lets us dismember hordes of zombie doctors with chainsaws, and that's hardly the definition of restraint. And well, yeah, in that sense you are right. But while we don't want to disregard Leon's grisly contributions, the developer's confidence is asserted most clearly in newcomer Grace. Her segments favor patience and interpretation over spectacle, a near radical refinement of Resident Evil's earliest gameplay loops. This matters now because amid a surge in thoughtful, design-focused horror games, Resident Evil Requiem affirms that the long-standing series is not as a trend chaser, but as the genre's anchor. The developer understands the name holds gravity, and bringing a new protagonist to the fold, one whose experience with undead antics is all but alien, will be proven shrewd. Look, the developer hasn't just plucked new ideas out of thin air. Grace's apprehensive shuffling, winding ever tighter like a jack-in-the-box, doesn't feel tense by chance. Requiem may be the latest title in a long-running series, but it's the first mainline entry since the developer began reinterpreting their classics. They've shown us they understand what made them work in the first place, and they're bringing that knowledge to the mix in Requiem. You see, Resident Evil 2's 2019 remake didn't just modernize the original's iconic atmosphere. Despite sharper graphics and a new over-the-shoulder perspective, fidelity and field of view don't facilitate fear alone. No, RE2R remembers what is unseen, always scares us the most. So what did the developer do? They remodeled the Raccoon City Police Department as a labyrinthine stronghold, lined with suffocating corridors, locked doors, and dead ends. Where modern gameplay and graphics risk lifting the fog too much, RPD's elusive architecture design restored some cloudiness in our minds. The series' remake efforts have been a bit of a mixed bag. At its best, the approach mirrors what made Resident Evil 2's remake such a success, a careful modernization that respects the original's core strengths while tightening the experience with fluid movement and smarter, more deliberate combat. The same couldn't be said of Resident Evil 3's remake. Atmospherically, it was on point, but the original's iconic pursuer Nemesis was relegated to largely scripted events, sucking all of the terror out of his appearances. Resident Evil Requiem comes as a culmination of these lessons. The developer knows exactly what kind of game it needs to be, and their confidence shows in how Requiem chooses to make you afraid. Through, as alluded to earlier, Grace, arguably the series' most distilled, deliberate protagonist to date. So what makes her so compelling isn't what she can or cannot do, it's in how visibly she reacts to danger. She jolts and recoils, startles easily, and flees desperately. Yet her reactions feel deliberate, as if the developer has been careful to portray her as groundedly as possible. For a series that has increasingly played with the over-dramatic, it is refreshing for the story lead on this occasion to be designed in earnest, realistically, relatable, and with restraint. And exploring this point further, survival horror as a genre often relies on helplessness or weakness for building tension. Not so here. Grace occupies a new middle ground, strafing between capability and inexperience. It's a fresh way for Resident Evil to deliver fear, embodying the character's perspective to build anticipation. And sure, she might learn to control her frightened impulses as the game goes on, but for those early portions at least, you're right there with her, symbiotically sharing her terror. Whether or not you're a seasoned horror gamer, Grace's design will make you feel vulnerable, yet just like her, you are not helpless. This is a far cry from the last time Resident Evil tried to do more than one thing at once. Resident Evil 6's bloated, globe-trotting excess nearly killed the franchise back in 2012. Whether it's worth asking now if it's really as bad as you remember is beyond the scope of this feature, but the reason that we bring this up is because Requiem is exercising similar levels of excess. Dual protagonists, numerous locations, multiple stalker types, and a plethora of zombie archetypes. But it's being done this time with discipline, and that word, yet again, restraint. Look, now this isn't a Resident Evil 6 retrospective. We're not looking to list mistakes of the past, but it is important to note that Requiem doesn't offer any corrections. Instead, what it does bring is growth. Yes, we said earlier that the developer has been chucking out what does not work, but actually, at the risk of contradicting ourselves, holding Requiem up in comparison with Resident Evil 6 shows that they share a lot of similarities. Requiem matches Resident Evil 6 on ambition, just for instance. But the new will easily surpass the old by showing us when they hold back, when not to escalate, when to let tense moments marinate. Unlike Resident Evil 6, Requiem will feel meaningful through cohesion rather than chaos. And in 2026, scaling ambition for cohesion matters. This is a year that is already stacked with blockbuster titles, with an abundance of ambitious horror games to boot. From experimental indies like Holston, to the return of a long-dormant series in Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly Remake, plus Directive 8020, a new entry in Supermassive Games' Dark Pictures anthology, more Silent Hill, and hyper-violent Little Nightmares offshoot Reanimal. Horror shows no signs of marginalizing itself this year. Resident Evil Requiem won't be the boldest or the weirdest release, but it will be the genre's center of gravity regardless. Other titles will push structure and tone in more unpredictable directions, but these games bring something equally valuable: reliability, polish, and confidence. Requiem will set the bar for horror production value, design, and cohesion. And when the landscape is crowded, a flag bearer is what is needed to then guide the way. And what's more, horror successes of recent years like Silent Hill's Resurrection, Alan Wake 2, perhaps even last year's Lunar set Survivor Routine, all showcase a shift toward slower, more measured experiences, where space and stagnation draw psychological pressure. Resident Evil has always excelled at balancing threat with relief, but up until Requiem, this has been achieved by leaning on the contrast between spectacle and silence. And now the series is aligning with modern horror sensibilities. And while the developers are extracting that same threat-relief duality, only now in Grace's segments, it's coming through hushed anticipation. All told, if Resident Evil Requiem delivers on its promise, it won't just be one of 2026's biggest games because of its legacy or timing. It'll be big because it understands how to deliver fear to modern audiences, and crucially, how to do it with restraint. Sure, it's confident enough to come out swinging with Leon's more bombastic set pieces, but through new protagonist Grace, it's bringing back the terror of what's unseen better than almost anyone else in the genre. In 2026, that's a rare position for a blockbuster to occupy.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.